Hello friends, welcome back to Expertly Weird. Go ahead, get comfy. The air smells like beeswax, dried herbs, and the faintest trace of incense and panic. Wrap yourself in something soft, a wool cloak, a linen shift, or just the crushing weight of societal expectations, and pour yourself something warm. Mulled wine, honeyed ale, holy water if it helps. I'm not here to judge. Because tonight's story, it's awkward, it's ancient, and it's very, very bloody. Or at least, it was supposed to be. Tonight we're talking about what happened when medieval women, caught between honour culture, hymen myths, and a truly terrifying lack of privacy, had to fake virginity on their wedding night. From alchemical potions to theatrical sheets, religious loopholes to strategically placed leeches. Let's just say, ingenuity has always been in fashion. So light a candle, say a prayer to whichever saint handles sex panic, Saint Agnes maybe, and settle in. Because this one's going to make you grateful for modern awkwardness. Picture this, you're a young woman in medieval Europe, and tomorrow is your wedding day. But there's one small problem that could destroy your entire future, your family's reputation, and possibly get you killed. You're not a virgin. And in a world where your worth as a woman literally depends on an intact hymen, you need a solution fast. Tonight we're diving into the shadowy, desperate world of medieval deception, where resourceful women developed ingenious methods to fake the one thing society demanded above all else. We're talking about blood capsules made from animal bladder, strategic positioning during intimate moments, and even surgical procedures that would make modern doctors cringe. Before we begin this journey into medieval trickery, take a moment to subscribe if you enjoy content that explores the hidden corners of history. And let me know in the comments what time period fascinates you most, because there's always more to uncover. Now settle in, because what you're about to learn will completely change how you think about medieval women. They weren't just passive victims of a patriarchal system. They were clever, determined survivors who developed an entire underground network of deception. The stakes couldn't have been higher. In medieval Europe, a woman's virginity wasn't just personal. It was political, economic, and spiritual currency all rolled into one. Noble families built entire dynasties on the promise of untouched daughters. Marriage contracts included explicit virginity clauses, and the consequences of being discovered as impure ranged from public humiliation to literal death. But here's what the history books don't tell you. Medieval women weren't helpless. They fought back with creativity, cunning, and a knowledge of human anatomy that would surprise you. Let's start with the most straightforward method, the blood deception. Medieval women discovered that fresh animal blood, carefully preserved in small pouches made from sheep intestines, could be concealed internally and released at precisely the right moment. But this wasn't amateur hour. These women had to become experts in timing, positioning, and performance. The blood had to be the right temperature, the right consistency, and released with just enough force to be convincing, but not so much as to seem unnatural. Some women would mix the animal blood with their own menstrual blood to ensure the scent and colour were perfect. Others added herbs like aloe or certain tree saps to achieve the ideal texture. The procurement of this blood was an art form itself. Butchers' wives often served as suppliers, carefully collecting and preserving blood from freshly slaughtered chickens, rabbits, or young lambs. The blood had to be fresh enough to maintain its natural properties, but processed enough to prevent coagulation at the wrong moment. Storage presented another challenge entirely. Without refrigeration, women had to rely on cool cellars, underground chambers, or even burial sites to keep their precious cargo from spoiling. Some developed elaborate systems using clay pots nested within larger vessels filled with cold water, creating primitive refrigeration systems. But the blood trick was just the beginning. Medieval women also mastered the art of strategic pain performance. They studied the exact reactions expected from a virgin's first intimate encounter, practicing facial expressions, vocal responses, and body language until they could deliver an Oscar-worthy performance. This required an understanding of male expectations that was both sophisticated and deeply manipulative. Women would interview recently married friends, observe reactions during wedding night preparations, and even study the behaviour of genuinely inexperienced brides to perfect their act. Some women went further, using herbal preparations to create temporary swelling or sensitivity that would enhance the illusion of inexperience. Certain plants, when applied topically, could create sensations that mimicked the discomfort associated with a first encounter. The positioning strategy was equally crucial. Medieval women learned that specific angles and positions could create the physical resistance expected by their new husbands, even without the anatomical feature everyone assumed was there. This knowledge was passed down through whispered conversations between mothers and daughters, shared in the shadows of women's quarters, and refined through generations of desperate brides. Then there were the truly bold women who turned to surgical solutions. Medieval medicine was primitive, but certain practitioners, often midwives or women who specialized in feminine health, developed procedures to artificially recreate virginity. Using needle and thread, they would create temporary barriers that would break convincingly during consummation. These procedures were incredibly dangerous. Without proper anesthesia or sterile conditions, infection was almost guaranteed. Many women died from these attempts, but the desperation drove others to take the risk anyway. The practitioners who performed these surgeries operated in complete secrecy, often working by candlelight in hidden chambers or abandoned buildings. The tools were crude: sharpened bone needles, thread made from animal sinew, and herbal preparations that served as primitive antiseptics. Some practitioners developed their own techniques, experimenting with different materials and methods. Fish bladder became a popular choice for creating temporary barriers, as it was thin, flexible, and would dissolve naturally. Recovery from these procedures required careful planning. Women needed time to heal while maintaining the appearance of normal daily activities. They developed elaborate excuses for temporary changes in behaviour, posture, or energy levels. Some would claim minor illnesses or injuries to explain any discomfort or limitation in movement. But perhaps the most sophisticated deception involved enlisting accomplices. Trusted servants, particularly those with access to the bridal chamber, could be bribed or convinced to assist in the charade. They might sprinkle animal blood on bedsheets beforehand, create distractions at crucial moments, or even provide false testimony about their mistress's virtue. These servant networks operated like medieval spy rings. Information about suspicious behaviour, potential investigations, or rival family schemes would flow through kitchen staff, ladies' maids, and personal attendants. A well-connected servant could provide advance warning of virginity tests, examinations by midwives, or other threats to the deception. The economic aspects of this underground system were staggering. Women would pay enormous sums for blood, surgical procedures, or accomplice services. Some families went into debt financing their daughters' deceptions. Black markets developed around virginity-related materials and services, with prices fluctuating based on demand and risk. Professional virgin makers emerged as a distinct occupation, though they operated in absolute secrecy. These specialists might serve multiple families, travelling between estates and maintaining extensive networks of suppliers and contacts. They commanded high fees and lived constantly under threat of exposure, which would mean certain death. The psychological toll on these women was immense. Living with such a massive secret, constantly fearing discovery, and maintaining perfect performances under pressure created levels of stress that we can barely imagine. Many developed elaborate mental strategies to cope with the anxiety, creating detailed backstories for their supposed purity and rehearsing responses to potential questions or challenges. Some women even convinced themselves of their own lies, creating false memories and genuinely believing in their fabricated innocence. This psychological self-deception served as protection against the intense scrutiny they faced, but it also created its own complications when reality conflicted with their constructed narratives. The most successful deceivers were those who understood that virginity fraud wasn't just about the wedding night. It was about maintaining a consistent persona over months or even years of courtship, engagement, and marriage. Every gesture, every response, every reaction had to align with society's expectations of an innocent woman. This extended performance required incredible discipline and attention to detail. Women had to monitor their speech patterns, avoid certain topics of conversation, and carefully control their body language in all social situations. A single slip, one moment of revealed knowledge or comfort with intimate topics, could destroy years of careful construction. The network of deception extended far beyond individual women and their immediate circles. Entire communities of females developed sophisticated communication systems to share techniques, warn of dangers, and support each other through these elaborate charades. Market days became opportunities for coded conversations, where seemingly innocent discussions about fabric dyes or cooking ingredients actually conveyed crucial information about blood preservation methods or upcoming virginity examinations. Religious festivals provided cover for more extensive gatherings, where experienced women could mentor newcomers in the arts of deception. These informal schools operated under the guise of prayer groups or charitable organizations, but their real purpose was far more subversive. Knowledge flowed through generations, like an underground river, each woman adding her own innovations and refinements to the collective wisdom. The church, ironically, became both enemy and unwitting ally in these schemes. While religious doctrine demanded absolute purity, the complex rituals and extensive preparation periods for weddings created numerous opportunities for deception. Lengthy engagement periods allowed time for surgical procedures to heal. Mandatory pre-marriage retreats provided cover for final preparations and strategy sessions. Some particularly clever women exploited religious loopholes and technicalities. They argued that spiritual purity mattered more than physical state, or claimed divine visions that justified their circumstances. A few even convinced their families that their loss of virginity resulted from supernatural encounters rather than earthly indiscretions, transforming potential scandal into religious mystery. The medical knowledge required for successful deception was surprisingly advanced. Women became experts in human anatomy, understanding blood flow, tissue healing, and bodily responses with precision that rivaled trained physicians. They developed their own anatomical terminology, created detailed diagrams, and maintained careful records of successful techniques. Herbal medicine played a crucial role in these schemes. Certain plants could induce temporary swelling, create convincing discharge, or produce the physical sensations associated with intact virginity. Women cultivated secret gardens, often disguised as vegetable plots or medicinal herb collections, where they grew the specific plants needed for their deceptions. The preparation of these botanical aids required considerable skill. Dosages had to be precisely calculated, timing carefully coordinated, and side effects minimized. Some combinations could be dangerous or even deadly if misused, so knowledge was closely guarded and passed only to trusted individuals who demonstrated proper understanding and discretion. Regional variations in deception techniques reflected local customs, available materials, and cultural expectations. In coastal areas, seaweed and fish-derived products featured prominently in artificial virginity procedures. Mountain communities relied on alpine herbs and animal products from highland creatures. Urban centres developed more sophisticated methods using imported materials and professional services. These geographical differences created a form of medieval intellectual property, where certain regions became famous for particular techniques. Women would sometimes travel considerable distances to learn specific methods or obtain specialized materials, creating an underground economy that spanned entire kingdoms. The psychological warfare between suspicious husbands and deceptive wives reached incredible levels of sophistication. Men developed their own counter techniques, learning to recognize signs of deception and devising tests to verify authenticity. This created an escalating arms race of deception and detection that pushed both sides to extraordinary lengths. Some husbands employed spies within their own households, bribing servants to report suspicious behavior or unusual preparations. Others consulted with physicians, seeking medical opinions on their wives' physical state. The most paranoid arranged surprise examinations by midwives or demanded witnesses during consummation. Women responded by developing counterintelligence networks, identifying and neutralizing potential informants within their households. They created false evidence to mislead suspicious husbands, planted convincing but incorrect information with known spies, and even arranged for fake witnesses to provide testimony supporting their supposed virginity. The stakes of these elaborate games extended far beyond individual marriages. Political alliances between noble families often hinged on guaranteed virginity, making successful deception a matter of international importance. Wars could be prevented or provoked based on whether a princess's purity could be convincingly demonstrated. Royal marriages presented the ultimate challenge for virginity deception. Multiple physicians, representatives from foreign courts, and religious officials might all be involved in verification processes. The pressure was so intense that some royal women suffered complete psychological breakdowns under the scrutiny. Professional virgin verifiers emerged as court officials, developing increasingly sophisticated examination techniques. These specialists commanded enormous fees and wielded considerable political power, since their pronouncements could determine the fate of kingdoms. The competition between deceivers and verifiers drove constant innovation on both sides. The economic implications of successful virginity deception were staggering. A convincing performance could secure dowries worth small fortunes, establish trade relationships between merchant families, or cement political alliances that lasted generations. Conversely, exposure could result in complete financial ruin, exile, or execution. Insurance systems developed around these high-stakes deceptions. Wealthy families would pay substantial sums to professional deceivers who guaranteed success or offered compensation for failure. These arrangements were incredibly complex, involving multiple parties, escape plans, and contingency funds for various scenarios. The moral complexity of these situations created fascinating ethical dilemmas that medieval societies struggled to address. Religious leaders debated whether successful deception constituted a form of divine intervention or demonic influence. Legal scholars argued about the validity of marriages based on fraudulent claims of purity. Some progressive thinkers began questioning the entire system, suggesting that excessive focus on virginity created more problems than it solved. These early feminist voices faced severe persecution, but their ideas planted seeds that would eventually grow into broader social change. The psychological profiles of successful deceivers reveal remarkable strength and adaptability. These women developed extraordinary skills in compartmentalization, stress management, and performance under pressure. Many displayed characteristics that modern psychology would associate with exceptional leadership and crisis management abilities. The training process for aspiring deceivers was incredibly rigorous, involving physical conditioning, mental preparation, and extensive practice sessions. Women learned to control their breathing, heart rate, and muscle tension to maintain convincing performances even under intense scrutiny. Some developed meditation techniques or mental exercises that helped them stay calm during critical moments. Support systems within deception networks provided crucial emotional assistance. Women shared coping strategies, offered encouragement during difficult periods, and provided safe spaces where the constant performance could be temporarily dropped. These relationships often became lifelong bonds that transcended social class boundaries. The technological innovations developed by medieval women for virginity deception were genuinely impressive. They created precision timing devices using water clocks or candle measurements to coordinate complex schemes. Some developed early forms of chemical preservation to extend the shelf life of biological materials used in their deceptions. Communication technologies also advanced rapidly within these networks. Women created coded languages, invisible inks made from plant extracts, and message delivery systems that could operate undetected within existing social structures. Information security became a crucial skill, with elaborate protocols for protecting sensitive knowledge from discovery. The legacy of these medieval deception networks extends far beyond their immediate historical context. They represent early examples of organized female resistance to oppressive social systems, demonstrating sophisticated collective action and mutual support that would influence later women's movements throughout history. The ingenuity of these medieval women reached its peak in their manipulation of medical examinations themselves. When faced with official virginity tests, the most skilled deceivers turned the examination process into their greatest opportunity for misdirection. They understood that male physicians, despite their supposed expertise, often knew less about female anatomy than the women they were examining. These medical encounters became elaborate theatrical productions. Women would arrive at examinations having consumed specific herbal preparations that induced temporary physical changes. Certain plant extracts could cause swelling, alter natural lubrication, or create sensations that mimicked the expected signs of virginity. The timing had to be perfect, with effects peaking exactly during the examination window. Some women went further, deliberately inducing minor injuries or irritations that would make thorough examination painful and therefore brief. A strategically applied irritating herb could create enough discomfort that even the most determined physician would limit their investigation. Others used this manufactured pain as cover for the vocal and physical responses expected during invasive procedures. The psychology of medical deception required understanding male ego and professional pride. Experienced deceivers learned to subtly flatter examining physicians, praising their expertise while simultaneously guiding them toward the conclusions they wanted. A well-timed wince of pain, combined with respectful submission to medical authority, could convince even skeptical doctors of authentic virginity. But the most audacious women actually corrupted the medical establishment itself. They identified physicians who could be bribed, blackmailed, or seduced into providing false testimony about their examinations. These corrupted medical professionals became invaluable assets, offering not just fraudulent verification, but also genuine medical advice on maintaining successful deceptions. The network of compromised physicians operated like a medieval medical mafia. They shared information about upcoming examinations, warned their clients about particularly thorough investigators, and even developed standardized false examination procedures that appeared rigorous while revealing nothing. Some maintained detailed records of their fraudulent activities, creating a form of medieval medical insurance fraud. Payment for these corrupted services came in many forms beyond simple monetary compensation. Some physicians demanded ongoing access to the women they protected, creating exploitative relationships that lasted years. Others sought political favors, business opportunities, or protection from their own professional misconduct. The most cunning demanded detailed information about other families' secrets, building intelligence networks that rivaled royal spy systems. The seasonal timing of deception attempts reveals sophisticated understanding of social and biological cycles. Spring weddings required different preparation strategies than autumn ceremonies. Winter deceptions had to account for limited access to fresh materials and reduced opportunities for secret meetings. Summer presented challenges with preservation of biological materials, but offered more opportunities for travel and gathering of supplies. Harvest festivals became crucial periods for deception networks, providing cover for large gatherings where techniques could be shared and materials distributed. These seemingly innocent community celebrations masked intensive educational workshops where experienced deceivers trained newcomers in the essential skills of virginity fraud. The agricultural calendar also influenced the availability of key materials. Certain plants only produced the necessary compounds during specific growing seasons. Animal blood had to be collected during traditional slaughter periods. Even the lunar cycle played a role, with many women timing their procedures to coincide with new moons for maximum secrecy. Weather patterns became strategic considerations in planning elaborate deceptions. Rainy seasons provided cover for suspicious activities, but complicated travel and communication. Drought years meant higher prices for imported materials, but also reduced scrutiny from authorities focused on more pressing concerns. Severe winters could disrupt entire deception networks, forcing postponement of planned procedures. The class warfare aspects of virginity deception created fascinating social dynamics. Wealthy women could afford the most sophisticated techniques and professional services, but they also faced the most intense scrutiny and had the most to lose. Poor women had fewer resources, but often more flexibility and less oversight. Middle-class families found themselves in the most precarious position, lacking the resources of the wealthy, but facing expectations almost as demanding. These families often went into devastating debt financing their daughters' deceptions, sometimes mortgaging entire estates to pay for procedures or materials. The social pressure to maintain appearances drove many families to financial ruin. Servant classes developed their own parallel deception economies, offering services to wealthy families while practicing their own versions of the same techniques. Kitchen maids learned to preserve blood as effectively as noble ladies, while seamstresses developed their own surgical skills, rivaling those of professional virgin makers. The intergenerational transmission of deception knowledge created fascinating family dynamics. Mothers who had successfully deceived their own husbands faced complex decisions about sharing their secrets with daughters. Some families developed multi-generational conspiracies, with grandmothers, mothers, and daughters all collaborating in elaborate schemes spanning decades. These family networks often included detailed written records, disguised as recipe collections or household management guides. Seemingly innocent instructions for preserving meat or treating fabric stains actually contained coded information about blood preparation and surgical techniques. Some families maintained these deceptive archives for centuries, passing them down like precious heirlooms. The training of young women began years before marriage became a possibility. Girls as young as 12 received subtle education in the basics of deception, learning to recognize the signs of suspicion and practice the behaviors expected of pure maidens. This early preparation was crucial, since convincing performances required years of consistent practice. Finishing schools for young noble women became inadvertent training centers for deception. While officially teaching proper comportment and social graces, these institutions also provided opportunities for experienced women to share more practical knowledge with impressionable students. The most sophisticated schools developed entire curricula around maintaining virtue, with coded lessons that actually taught the opposite. The psychological profiling of potential husbands became an essential skill for women planning deceptions. They learned to identify which men were most likely to be suspicious, which could be easily fooled, and which might be sympathetic to their situations. This intelligence gathering often began years before actual courtship, with families researching potential suitors as thoroughly as military strategists studying enemy forces. Some women specialized in reading male psychology, becoming expert advisors to other deceivers. These psychological consultants could predict with remarkable accuracy how specific men would react to different deception strategies. They developed detailed profiles of eligible bachelors, noting their sexual experience, medical knowledge, family relationships, and personal insecurities. The most successful deceivers learned to exploit male vanity and sexual ego to their advantage. They understood that many men preferred to believe they were their wives' first partners, regardless of evidence to the contrary. A convincing display of awe and gratitude could override considerable suspicion, appealing to masculine pride more effectively than any physical deception. Counterintelligence operations became necessary as suspicious families hired their own investigators to verify potential brides' purity. These medieval private detectives developed sophisticated surveillance techniques, interviewing servants, monitoring social activities, and even conducting covert examinations of personal belongings for evidence of sexual experience. Women responded by developing their own security protocols, creating false evidence to mislead investigators while hiding genuine proof of their activities. They planted convincing but incorrect information, established alibis for suspicious periods, and even arranged for fake witnesses to provide testimony supporting their supposed innocence. The arms race between deceivers and investigators drove remarkable innovations in both surveillance and counter-surveillance techniques. Some investigators used trained animals to detect specific scents associated with sexual activity. Deceivers countered by developing masking agents and creating false scent trails to confuse these animal detectors. The international aspects of these deception networks reveal the truly global scope of medieval women's resistance to patriarchal control. Trade routes that carried spices and silks also transmitted deception techniques and specialized materials. Women in different countries shared innovations through traveling merchants, pilgrims, and diplomatic marriages. Regional specializations developed as different areas became known for particular aspects of virginity deception. Italian city-states pioneered sophisticated surgical techniques, while Northern European communities perfected herbal preparations. Islamic territories contributed advanced medical knowledge, and Eastern European networks developed the most effective psychological manipulation strategies. Cultural exchange programs emerged as wealthy families sent their daughters to foreign courts ostensibly for education, but actually to learn deception techniques unavailable in their home countries. These international finishing schools created a truly cosmopolitan community of skilled deceivers who maintained lifelong networks across national boundaries. The documentation challenges faced by these networks required incredible creativity in record keeping and information management. Since written evidence of deception activities would be catastrophically dangerous if discovered, women developed sophisticated systems of oral tradition, symbolic notation, and disguised documentation. Some networks used musical notation to record deception techniques, embedding procedural information within seemingly innocent songs and ballads. Others developed elaborate needlework patterns that contained coded instructions, creating beautiful tapestries and clothing that actually served as technical manuals for aspiring deceivers. The most advanced networks created their own languages and writing systems, developing entirely new alphabets and vocabularies that could be used for secure communication. These linguistic innovations often incorporated elements from multiple languages, creating codes that would be virtually impossible for outsiders to decipher without extensive inside knowledge. The religious complications of virginity deception created fascinating theological debates that influenced church doctrine for generations. Progressive religious thinkers argued that excessive focus on physical purity contradicted spiritual teachings about forgiveness and redemption. Conservative voices insisted that successful deception represented demonic influence and deserved severe punishment. Some women found ways to incorporate religious justifications into their deception strategies, claiming divine inspiration for their actions, or interpreting scripture in ways that supported their choices. A few even convinced religious authorities that their loss of virginity resulted from miraculous or supernatural encounters, transforming potential scandals into religious mysteries. The most audacious deceivers actually infiltrated religious institutions themselves, becoming nuns or abbesses while maintaining secret romantic relationships. These religious women used their positions to provide sanctuary for other deceivers, creating networks within convents and monasteries that operated for decades without detection. The technological legacy of medieval virginity deception extends far beyond its immediate historical context. The precision timing devices, chemical preservation techniques, and communication systems developed by these women influenced later innovations in multiple fields. Some techniques developed for biological material preservation contributed to advances in food storage and medical procedures. The psychological manipulation strategies perfected by medieval deceivers provided foundational knowledge for later developments in negotiation, diplomacy, and even modern advertising techniques. The understanding of human behavior and social dynamics demonstrated by these women was centuries ahead of formal psychological research. The organizational structures created by deception networks established templates for underground resistance movements that would influence later social and political revolutions. The communication systems, security protocols, and mutual support mechanisms developed by medieval women provided blueprints for numerous subsequent movements challenging established authority. The most dangerous period for any deceiver came during the weeks immediately following marriage, when new husbands remained vigilant for signs that their supposedly virgin wives possessed knowledge or comfort levels inconsistent with complete innocence. This post-wedding surveillance period required perhaps the greatest acting skills of all, as women had to maintain their fabricated naivety while navigating the intimate realities of married life. Experienced deceivers developed elaborate strategies for this crucial phase. They would feign confusion about basic intimate matters, ask seemingly innocent questions that reinforced their supposed inexperience, and display carefully calculated levels of discomfort or awkwardness during private moments. Some women even practiced fake crying techniques, understanding that periodic tears and apparent emotional overwhelm would convince husbands of their authentic innocence. The timing of these emotional displays had to be precise. Too much distress might suggest trauma from previous encounters, while too little might indicate suspicious familiarity with intimate situations. The most skilled performers learn to calibrate their responses based on their husbands' personalities, providing just enough vulnerability to satisfy expectations without raising additional questions. Sleep patterns became another crucial element of post-wedding deception. Many husbands expected their virgin wives to experience disrupted sleep following their first intimate encounters, so women learned to fake insomnia, nightmares, or restless behavior that would seem consistent with processing traumatic new experiences. Some would deliberately stay awake, creating genuine exhaustion that would support their performance of distress. The gradual adaptation process required careful choreography over weeks and months. Women had to slowly transition from apparent shock and discomfort to growing acceptance and eventual enjoyment, following timelines that matched societal expectations for virgin wives' emotional development. Moving too quickly through these stages could arouse suspicion, while progressing too slowly might suggest ongoing trauma that could prompt unwanted medical attention. Physical evidence management extended far beyond the wedding night itself. Women learned to create ongoing signs of their supposed adjustment to married life, including strategic complaints about soreness, requests for specific herbal remedies, and carefully timed discussions with other married women that their husbands might overhear. These conversations served double duty, both reinforcing their innocent status and gathering intelligence about what other wives were experiencing. The most sophisticated deceivers actually studied the genuine experiences of truly virginal brides, interviewing them extensively about their physical and emotional responses during early marriage. This research allowed them to incorporate authentic details into their own performances, creating layers of believability that could withstand even intense scrutiny from suspicious husbands or family members. Household servants became crucial allies or dangerous threats during this vulnerable period. Women had to carefully manage their relationships with staff members who might observe inconsistencies between their public performances and private behaviours. Some deceivers developed elaborate systems of gifts, threats, and mutual blackmail to ensure servant loyalty, while others simply replaced entire household staffs with new employees who had no knowledge of pre-marriage activities. The financial costs of maintaining these elaborate deceptions often continued for years after marriage. Women needed ongoing supplies of herbal preparations, regular consultations with medical accomplices, and continuous payments to maintain networks of supportive servants and allies. Many families found themselves trapped in cycles of debt as the expenses of successful deception compounded over time. Pregnancy became both opportunity and crisis for women maintaining virginity deceptions. On one hand, successful conception could serve as ultimate proof of marital consummation and deflect attention from questions about prior experience. On the other hand, certain aspects of pregnancy and childbirth could reveal inconsistencies in women's supposed sexual histories to experienced midwives and physicians. Advanced deceivers learned to manipulate even pregnancy-related examinations, understanding that male physicians typically knew less about female reproductive anatomy than the women they were examining. They could guide medical consultations toward conclusions that supported their fabricated histories, while avoiding procedures or questions that might reveal inconvenient truths. The intergenerational transmission of deception knowledge created complex family dynamics that could span decades. Mothers who had successfully deceived their own husbands faced difficult decisions about whether to share their secrets with daughters, knowing that such knowledge could save their children's lives but also implicate them in ongoing conspiracies that could destroy entire family lineages if discovered. Some families developed elaborate testing systems to evaluate their daughters' trustworthiness before revealing family deception secrets. These assessments might involve months of observation, carefully designed loyalty tests, and gradual revelation of increasingly sensitive information to gauge reactions and discretion levels. Only daughters who demonstrated absolute reliability would be inducted into the full conspiracy. The psychological toll of maintaining these lifelong deceptions created unique mental health challenges that medieval society had no framework for understanding or addressing. Women living with such massive secrets often developed anxiety disorders, depression, and complex trauma responses that manifested in various physical and emotional symptoms throughout their lives. Support networks within deception communities provided crucial psychological assistance, offering safe spaces where women could temporarily drop their performances and discuss their genuine experiences and emotions. These therapeutic relationships often became more intimate and supportive than marriages themselves, creating alternative family structures that transcended traditional social boundaries. The most successful long-term deceivers learned to compartmentalize their identities so effectively that they could maintain multiple distinct personalities simultaneously. Their public selves as virtuous wives and mothers operated completely independently from their private identities as skilled conspirators and sexual beings, allowing them to function in both roles without psychological breakdown. Religious confession presented particular challenges for Catholic women maintaining virginity deceptions. They had to navigate the sacrament of penance without revealing their ongoing lies while still maintaining their spiritual standing within their communities. Some developed elaborate theological justifications for their deceptions, while others simply avoided confession altogether and accepted the spiritual consequences. A few particularly audacious women actually corrupted their confessors, either through seduction, bribery, or blackmail, creating religious accomplices who could provide spiritual cover for their ongoing deceptions. These corrupted priests became valuable assets, offering not just sacramental protection, but also intelligence about other families' secrets and potential threats to established deception networks. The seasonal rhythms of medieval society created regular opportunities for deception network maintenance and expansion. Religious festivals, harvest celebrations, and seasonal markets provided cover for gatherings where techniques could be shared, materials distributed, and new members recruited into established conspiracy networks. These seemingly innocent community events masked intensive educational workshops where experienced deceivers trained newcomers in essential skills while established networks coordinated their activities and shared intelligence about potential threats. The most sophisticated organizations developed elaborate communication systems that could operate within existing social structures without attracting attention. Trade relationships became crucial elements of deception network logistics, as traveling merchants provided not only specialized materials, but also communication links between distant communities of conspiring women. These commercial connections created international supply chains that could deliver rare herbs, surgical instruments, or other specialized equipment to remote locations where local resources were insufficient. The economic impact of these underground networks was substantial enough to influence regional trade patterns and pricing structures. Demand for specific materials could drive market prices, while the need for discretion created premium pricing for specialized services. Some merchants built entire business models around serving these hidden markets, developing sophisticated distribution systems that operated alongside legitimate commerce. Professional virgin makers evolved into highly specialized service providers who commanded extraordinary fees and operated with the secrecy and security protocols of modern intelligence agencies. These experts maintained detailed client records, developed standardized procedures, and created quality assurance systems that guaranteed results or offered compensation for failure. The training required to become a professional virgin maker was extensive and dangerous, involving years of apprenticeship under experienced practitioners while constantly risking exposure and execution. Only the most skilled and discreet individuals could succeed in this profession, creating a small elite class of specialists who wielded considerable influence within deception networks. Competition between professional practitioners drove continuous innovation in techniques and technologies, as individual specialists sought to develop signature methods that would distinguish their services and justify premium pricing. These innovations often involved dangerous experimentation on willing volunteers, pushing the boundaries of medieval medical knowledge in pursuit of more convincing deception methods. The legal implications of virginity deception created complex jurisprudential challenges that influenced the development of contract law, marriage legislation, and fraud statutes throughout medieval Europe. Courts struggled to address cases where successful deceptions were discovered years after marriage, raising questions about the validity of marital contracts and the legitimacy of children born from fraudulent unions. Some legal scholars argued that successful deception demonstrated such extraordinary skill and determination that it should be admired rather than punished, while others insisted that any fraud in marriage contracts invalidated all subsequent legal relationships. These debates influenced legal thinking about consent, misrepresentation, and the nature of contractual obligations for generations. The most sophisticated deception networks actually influenced legislation by placing their members in positions where they could affect legal development. Women who had successfully deceived their way into powerful marriages sometimes found themselves in positions to influence their husbands' legal and political decisions, creating subtle but significant changes in laws governing marriage, property rights, and women's legal status. The international diplomatic implications of royal virginity deceptions could affect relationships between entire kingdoms, as successful or failed deceptions influenced political alliances, trade relationships, and military cooperation. Some historical conflicts can be traced directly to disputes over royal brides' authenticity, while successful deceptions occasionally prevented wars by maintaining crucial diplomatic marriages. Professional diplomatic corps developed specialized expertise in evaluating and verifying royal virginity claims, creating an entire subspecialty within international relations focused on managing these sensitive negotiations. These diplomatic specialists commanded enormous fees and wielded significant political influence, since their assessments could determine the fate of nations. The technological innovations developed by medieval women for virginity deception influenced advances in multiple fields, including medicine, chemistry, engineering, and communications. Precision timing devices created for coordinating complex schemes contributed to improvements in mechanical clockwork. Chemical preservation techniques developed for biological materials, advanced food storage, and medical applications. The psychological manipulation strategies perfected by deceivers provided foundational knowledge for later developments in negotiation theory, diplomatic protocol, and even modern advertising techniques. The sophisticated understanding of human behavior demonstrated by these women was centuries ahead of formal psychological research and influenced thinking about motivation, persuasion, and social dynamics. The organizational structures created by deception networks established templates for underground resistance movements that influenced later social and political revolutions throughout European history. The communication systems, security protocols, and mutual support mechanisms developed by medieval women provided blueprints for numerous subsequent movements challenging established authority structures. Modern historians are only beginning to understand the full scope and sophistication of these medieval deception networks, as new archaeological evidence and document analysis reveals the extraordinary complexity of systems that operated in complete secrecy for centuries. These discoveries are fundamentally changing our understanding of medieval women's agency, intelligence, and capacity for organized resistance to oppressive social systems. The legacy of medieval virginity deception extends far beyond its immediate historical context, representing one of the earliest examples of organized female resistance to patriarchal control and demonstrating levels of collective action, technological innovation, and social coordination that challenge traditional assumptions about medieval women's capabilities and influence on historical development. The psychological warfare between medieval women and their investigators reached levels of sophistication that would impress modern intelligence agencies. As detection methods became more advanced, the deceivers responded with countermeasures that turned the very process of investigation into their greatest weapon. They learned to manipulate the investigators themselves, understanding that men tasked with verifying virginity often harbored their own insecurities and prejudices that could be expertly exploited. The most cunning women developed detailed psychological profiles of potential investigators before encounters ever took place. They researched the personal histories, sexual experiences, and professional reputations of physicians, midwives, and family representatives who might be called upon to verify their purity. This intelligence gathering revealed crucial weaknesses that could be leveraged during actual examinations. Some investigators could be intimidated through displays of noble authority or religious devotion. Others responded better to apparent vulnerability and helplessness. The most experienced deceivers maintained entire arsenals of personality types they could deploy depending on the situation, shifting seamlessly between roles as circumstances demanded. The corruption of verification systems became an art form in itself. Women discovered that many male investigators were more interested in the power their positions provided than in actual accuracy of their assessments. These men could be flattered into providing favourable evaluations through carefully orchestrated appeals to their professional ego and expertise. Female investigators presented different challenges, requiring entirely different approaches. Midwives and older women tasked with verification often possessed genuine expertise about female anatomy and experience. These encounters required the most sophisticated deception techniques, as the investigators understood exactly what they were looking for and could not be easily misled through ignorance or inexperience. The most successful strategy against knowledgeable female investigators involved creating genuine physical evidence that would satisfy expert examination. This required advanced surgical techniques and medical knowledge that pushed the boundaries of medieval healthcare capabilities. Some women underwent procedures so sophisticated that they would be impressive even by modern standards. The seasonal timing of investigations created additional strategic considerations. Winter examinations provided cover for certain deception techniques, as cold temperatures could explain physical responses and limit the thoroughness of uncomfortable procedures. Summer investigations required different approaches, but also provided access to fresh materials and optimal healing conditions for surgical preparations. Religious calendar considerations became crucial elements in planning deception strategies. Certain holy periods provided protection from invasive examinations, while others created additional scrutiny and pressure. The most skilled deceivers learned to time their marriages and related investigations to coincide with religious observances that would limit the scope and intensity of verification procedures. The development of standardized examination procedures by suspicious families created new challenges that required innovative responses. As investigators began following established protocols, women had to develop countermeasures that could defeat systematic approaches rather than relying on individual examiner weaknesses. This led to more sophisticated and universally applicable deception techniques. Professional associations among investigators created information-sharing networks that posed significant threats to established deception methods. When successful techniques became widely known among verification specialists, the women had to constantly innovate and develop new approaches to stay ahead of detection capabilities. The international exchange of investigation techniques created a global arms race between deceivers and their opponents. Methods developed in one kingdom would spread to others through diplomatic channels, forcing deception networks to maintain intelligence operations across multiple countries to track emerging threats to their established procedures. Counterintelligence became essential as some investigation networks began specifically targeting the deception organizations themselves. Rather than simply trying to detect individual fraud, these advanced investigators sought to identify and dismantle entire networks of conspirators, creating existential threats to communities of women who had operated successfully for generations. The most paranoid families began conducting multiple independent investigations, hiring different specialists to verify the same woman's status without revealing the parallel examinations. This redundancy created new challenges for deceivers who had to ensure their performances could withstand scrutiny from multiple experts simultaneously. Some investigations evolved into elaborate sting operations designed to trap not just individual deceivers, but their entire support networks. Investigators would pose as sympathetic allies, offering assistance or materials, while actually documenting the deception methods for later exposure and prosecution. The legal frameworks surrounding virginity investigations varied significantly between different kingdoms and regions, creating opportunities for sophisticated women to exploit jurisdictional differences. Some deceivers became experts in legal procedure, understanding exactly which authorities had jurisdiction over their situations and how different legal systems could be manipulated to their advantage. Appeals processes provided additional opportunities for skilled manipulators to overturn unfavorable investigation results. Women learned to identify sympathetic judges, exploit procedural technicalities, and present compelling alternative explanations for suspicious findings. The most successful appeals often involved shifting focus from physical evidence to character testimony and circumstantial factors. The economics of investigation corruption created sophisticated black markets where favourable assessments could be purchased through complex networks of intermediaries. These arrangements often involved multiple layers of plausible deniability, protecting both the corrupt investigators and their clients from direct exposure while ensuring reliable results. Payment systems for corrupted investigations became increasingly elaborate as the stakes rose and the risks increased. Simple monetary bribes gave way to complex arrangements involving ongoing financial support, political favours, business opportunities, and mutual blackmail designed to ensure long-term loyalty and silence. The most valuable corrupted investigators were those who maintained reputations for absolute integrity and thoroughness, while secretly providing fraudulent assessments to selected clients. These double agents could command enormous fees and provided crucial insurance for high-stakes deceptions, where failure would result in death or exile. These medieval women weren't just victims of an oppressive system. They were brilliant strategists who built one of history's most sophisticated underground resistance networks. From blood capsules to surgical procedures to psychological warfare, they developed techniques that would make modern intelligence agencies envious. Their legacy reminds us that, throughout history, when society demanded the impossible, resourceful people found ways to survive and thrive against all odds. What other